We know what BYU's coaches have said about the chances of BYU being at, if not at full strength, in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against Georgia Tech, but I say that history tells us BYU won't be at that level.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about BYU and the Pop-Tarts Bowl. What are the chances BYU will be at full strength in a week and a half's time when they kick that game off in Orlando? We'll delve into that. We'll also talk some BYU basketball. They are back in action tonight, taking on the Pacific Tigers, an old West Coast Conference mate of theirs. What are the chances BYU struggles in this game? Well, not very likely, but there's still some things I'd like to see in this game that we'll get into. And then we'll finish up today's show back on the football front with the first guy that I believe is an absolute must-get for BYU out of the transfer portal. And he's got a familiar name if you pay attention to the recruiting game when it comes to BYU. Who is the owner left out, and what does he offer to BYU? We'll get into all that. It's all ahead on today's show, and it's all brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and redeem the promo code Locked On College and get $20 off your first purchase. All right, so without further ado, BYU's coaches, Aaron Roderick and Jay Hill most notably, have been on the record saying that they believe that BYU will be at near full strength when it comes to taking on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Now, I can understand why they're saying that because they're in the trenches with these players every single day, going through practices, team meetings, individual meetings with these players when it comes to talking about their futures, whether it's at the collegiate level or the professional level. They're talking with these guys literally every single day, and they have a good idea of what the makeup and the character of this team would be. But all that being said, I do not believe that BYU will have every single guy that has been a stud for BYU this season when it comes to taking on Georgia Tech in this game. Now, I will happily eat crow if this is indeed the case, that they have their full complement of players. But consider the different circumstances some of these star players for BYU are looking at. We're looking at a guy in the case of Jack Kelly, who just recently accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl, which is the most prestigious postseason showcase event when it comes to being a college football player and your chances of showcasing your talents in a miniature combine setting in Mobile, Alabama. What are the chances the guy like Jack Kelly wants to mess up and potentially injure himself ahead of a showcase like that, if not mess up the entire NFL draft prep process for himself as well? He has to consider that. We have a guy like LJ Martin, much like Jack Kelly, who's been playing with a fairly significant shoulder injury throughout the entirety of the season. Well, if LJ, as some reports say, is seriously considering making the jump to the NFL himself, what are the chances he needs to have that shoulder surgery done now to speed up the process of him getting back into workouts, showing NFL teams what he's capable of, and ultimately keeping his dreams of being a pretty decent NFL draft pick, at least in theory, alive? Then you have the case of a guy like Bear Bachmeier, who has an ankle injury that was pretty significant against Texas Tech in that Big 12 title game that severely hampered his mobility in that game. And mobility is a huge, huge part of his ability as a quarterback. Is he going to be fully healed up as BYU gets ready for this bowl game? Aaron Roderick has said that a guy like Bear Bachmeier, it's not a serious injury. Okay, taking him at his word, expect that Bear Bachmeier will be there. But talking about guys like an LJ Martin who probably needs shoulder surgery, Jack Kelly probably is in the same case, if not wanting to consider his potential as an NFL draft prospect, considering he's going to the Senior Bowl. I look at this and say that this is a circumstance that I could see some guys for BYU opting out of this bowl game, and I, for one, would not blame them one bit. The simple fact of the matter is these bowl games, they're exhibitions, and they're an opportunity to finish off your season in the right way, and I fully get that. And I'm sure there'll be other guys who are chomping at the bit to go out there and play another game of football for BYU, because I do believe that BYU has a team of guys who just love playing the game of football. I believe that. Top to bottom, I think that Kalani Sitake has cultivated a culture in Provo, Utah that engenders itself to playing top-shelf football at all times and in all opportunities. But I also look at the reality of this situation, that this is a bowl game that guys need to consider their options for themselves. As I mentioned, I'd be happy to be dead wrong about this. I'd love to see Bear Bachmeier out there, LJ Martin, Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasgow, Keanu Tanavasa, on down the list, Chase Roberts, guys who have got a lot riding on their future when it comes to football players. I'd love to see them go out there and put on for BYU one last time. But at the same time, on the flip side of that coin, I wouldn't blame a single one of them and say, hey, guys, I appreciate it. I have put my all into this program. Guys like Chase Roberts who have put a full 5+ years into this program. I would wholeheartedly understand if they decide, you know what? It's in my best interest to be on the sidelines supporting my teammates, but I've got to consider my future. Is that going to rub some guys the wrong way? Maybe so. But I also think that BYU has got a strong enough culture in that locker room that not one of those guys, whether it were a Chase Roberts, whether it was a Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasgow, some of these vets who have put their heart and soul and literally their bodies on the line for this BYU football program, if they were to tell their guys, hey, understand that I want to play badly, but I've also got to consider my future here, and I'm going to sit this game out, I don't think there's a single person in that locker room who's going to fault them for considering what they have at stake in this game. It's not a popular opinion. It's not a popular position to take, but I also understand the reality of what these BYU players are going up against, because there, in some cases, there's millions, literally millions of dollars on the line. So I could understand why certain guys may be hesitant, or at least in the back of their minds are questioning, hey, do I really play in this game? The other side of it, one other point to be made here is a lot of coaches will tell you these bowl prep periods, they consider them a miniature spring ball. And if you know what spring ball is mainly built for, it's built for developing younger talent. Could it be an opportunity to let kind of the next generation of BYU players beyond, like I said, the Chase Roberts, the Jack Kellys, the Isaiah Glasgows, the LJ Martins, could the next crop of BYU talent that's kind of been playing maybe that second or third string role for BYU this season, could this be the time if those guys do decide that, you know what, I'm going to opt out? Their time to shine is to step in kind of the limelight in this game, which will be on national television, and let's see what the next generation has got. I don't think it's a bad idea to consider that as a positive for the BYU football program, because at some point you got to turn the page. And some of these guys have been in this program for literally years and have been mainstays that BYU has relied upon, in some cases wholly relied upon, at different positions. Well, I think it might be a high time to get a good look at that next generation of talent and see what you got. Like I said, I don't think it's necessarily going to be a popular position with fans, but I don't think the coaches, the players, the administrators in and around the BYU football program would fault any of these guys if they do what is in their best interest, and in many respects, what you call it, a business decision when it comes to their future in the NFL and beyond. We'll see how it all plays out. And if I'm going to eat crow, I'm happy to eat it in that circumstance, because that means that more BYU football players and a bigger chance of BYU winning against Georgia Tech are absolutely right there for the taking. All right, coming up next, BYU basketball. They are taking on the Pacific Tigers tonight. Yeah, they have a 97% chance of winning this game, but what do we want to see from BYU against UOP? Well, there's a couple of things, and one of them involves BYU's star player, AJ Dybantsa. An interesting comment from Kevin Young the other night after BYU's demolition of UC Riverside has me pondering something we might be able to see tonight, if not at one of these games, as BYU makes the run up to Big 12 play. And we'll delve into that next right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Omaha Steaks. The holidays are here, and whether you're hosting family, planning the perfect gift, or just keep things simple and delicious, Omaha Steaks is making it easier than ever this holiday season. From effortless holiday entertaining to unforgettable gifts, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience delivered straight to your door. What makes it even better, with Omaha Steaks, you always know exactly what you're getting. USDA certified tender steaks, premium proteins, gourmet sides, and decadent desserts that make anybody feel appreciated. The best part is I can speak to this directly because I have been the recipient of multiple Omaha Steaks gifts over the years for the holidays. And the best part is it's easy to gift. Shows up frozen, packed beautifully, ready to cook. The steaks are perfectly aged and insanely tender. It's restaurant level quality at home. They got a gazillion different options: steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, desserts, something for every kind of holiday gathering, no matter what you're looking for. And if you want to save big on your gourmet gifts and holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks, visit omahasteaks.com. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See the site for details, but that's omahasteaks.com using the promo code COLLEGE. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Do want to remind you guys, we have a brand new feature here on the Locked On Cougars podcast, and that is our everyday or all access tier is built for you. If you are a diehard everyday fan of Locked On Cougars, you will get one-on-one text access with myself, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount on our new Locked On merch store. Head to lockedoncougars.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can find the link in the show notes below, or once again, join us, lockedoncougars.supercast.com. All right, so BYU basketball is in action tonight as they take on the Pacific Tigers at the Marriott Center. Now, these are not the Pacific Tigers of yesteryear when BYU found themselves in what felt like, to use the term, a street fight against, remember, the Damon Stoudemire-led Pacific Tigers. Those were some games when BYU was in their West Coast Conference era that were some physical, grinded out, tough, hard-fought games. But BYU's got a whole different level of a squad now, led by AJ Dybantsa. So it shouldn't be that level in terms of being in that street fight type deal that it felt like at times when BYU was playing in the WCC. That being said, Pacific style is one that's a grinded out affair. They're going to try and slow down the tempo of this game and limit BYU's opportunities to really get out and run, which is something that BYU's been really good about the last few games, in particular, the last two that they've won. Their ability to really run on opponents, get out on the break, has been a big differentiator for BYU as they dominated UC Riverside, getting that big win also at Madison Square Garden over Clemson. And the biggest thing will be see how the pace of this game goes, because UOP, if you look at their metrics, they really like to slow it down out there. They're 124th in the KenPom ratings, so they're not a team that BYU is expected to struggle with. I said that before the break. They were supposed to have 97% chance of winning this game. So BYU appears is in no danger of losing this game, but the biggest thing I want to see from this is what can AJ Dybantsa really do in this circumstance? Because Kevin Young said it after BYU's game just this past weekend. He felt like AJ could have gone for 50 points against UC Riverside. Now, he ended up with 26 points in that game, was 11 of 17 from the field. If Kevin Young believes that AJ Dybantsa is capable of scoring a 50 burger, I want to see it. Now, do I want to see it at the expense of BYU finding themselves in a situation where UOP's got an opportunity to spring an upset? No, I don't want to see that. But at the same time, if a game gets out of hand and AJ feels like he's ready to go for it, why not let him unleash his entire arsenal? Let's really see what he can do. Now, that may come off as unsportsmanlike. That may come off as, hey, you're going to rub a team's nose in it. But this is basketball, and we see it all the time in the NBA. When you have a hot hand, you ride that hot hand. You see what you got with these guys. And I'd be very curious to see how dominant AJ can be in a certain single game. And if truly, like Kevin Young said, could he go for a 50 burger? That'd be fun to watch. And now, these games against Pacific, the games against UC Riverside, they also have Abilene Christian coming into the Marriott Center on Friday night. It's nothing against these teams, but these are money games. The reason why these games are being played is because these programs like Pacific, like UC Riverside, like Abilene Christian, on down the line, they are coming here to collect a check that tides over their athletic department. Some are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Most of the time, it's like between $250,000 and $500,000. And they're critical for those G6, or in this case, mid-major athletic departments to keep them afloat, because they need that influx of cash. So I get why these games are played, but at the same time, they don't feature very often top-tier competition for BYU. BYU's played a lot of good teams in this non-conference slate. Think of the games they have played against the likes of UConn, Clemson, even down in Orlando, the back-to-back games they played at the ESPN Events Invitational. They have played some top-tier opposition and have, have acquitted themselves quite well outside of the one loss to UConn, which was a very, very narrow loss after falling behind by a significant margin early in that game. We have seen, I think, everything we need to see about BYU in terms of their readiness factor for Big 12 play. But I do think that these are the type of games that if you want to let a guy go like an AJ Dybantsa, why not let him go in this game? And yeah, you know what? If a coach is going to take exception to it, you understand. You say, hey, sorry about that, but we wanted to see what AJ was capable of. Is that going to happen tonight? I got no way of knowing that, but it was an interesting offhand comment from Kevin Young saying he thought he could have gone for 50 in that game against UC Riverside. And I'm a guy who thinks that AJ Dybantsa is the very worst, a top 5 pick in next year's NBA draft. And I think that he's got a strong case to be the number 1 overall pick just with his size, his athleticism, his ability to dominate games. But I think there are going to be certain NBA teams who want to see, okay, does he have that ability to really dominate a game and really just take it completely over? We have seen flashes of that. I think the second half in particular against Clemson, that flash, I think that takeover ability for AJ Dybantsa. But can he really, I think, go out there and just be that dominant scorer that I think certain teams probably want to see from him when it comes to the NBA draft? That might be an opportunity for that in a game like this. But at the same time, I don't think he, speaking of AJ individually, is going to want to do that at the expense of having his teammates suffer in terms of their numbers, whether it's Rob Wright or a guy like Richie Saunders, even on down the depth chart. AJ seems to be a pretty selfless guy. And while me speaking as a podcast would like to see him go for a 50 burger, I can understand why he would be like, you know what? If I score 30 and my guys also score 20 and 20 apiece, I'm totally cool with that. But it'll be interesting to see because these games, like I said, I don't have much else I'm really looking at. And it's nothing against the Pacific Tigers. Nothing. I mean, no ill will towards them. But I want to see something to talk about, to have something to talk about. And, you know, a guy going for 50 points in a college game that's 40 minutes long, that would be something to talk about. We'll see if it comes to fruition, but very interested to see how it all goes tonight. If you want a couple of players to know from Pacific, if you're paying attention to that type of stuff, they do have a first-team All-WCC selection in Elias Ralph. He was a guy who was a really, really capable player last year. 6'7" forward, could be a guy that BYU will have Richie Saunders guarding on the perimeter. I'm sure Kennard Davis Jr. will also draw some time there. And the other guy to pay attention to, because I think this is a challenge for a guy like Kaba Keita, is Isaac Jack. He's a 6'11" center, got some height, got some size, listed at 240, 250 pounds. What is he capable of doing? A guy like Kaba Keita, who obviously is not that big or heavy, speaking of the height and weight disparity, but his athleticism is through the roof. How does he battle a guy like that who's probably a little more slow-footed in a game like this? I'm very curious to see what it looks like in that respect, but I do think the BYU should boat race Pacific, and we'll see how it all shakes out. We'll have a reaction segment for you guys on tomorrow's edition of the podcast, as we always do. All right, coming up next, a guy that I believe BYU, I think for the first time since I have been looking at the kind of the slow trickle, it's not a flood yet because the floodgates frankly have not opened yet. That's January 2nd. And obviously post bowl games, we start to hear more of this, but the transfer portal, it's coming, folks, and get ready for it. It's going to be a 10-day bonanza, it feels like, in early January. But one name has already trickled out as planning on entering the portal, and I think he's a guy that BYU absolutely, if at all possible, needs to snare. We'll talk about who Leona Leifau is and what he could offer to BYU next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, with the World Cup coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and also with 48 teams for the first time ever, it is going to be, in a word, massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part about this, and that's why Game Time, their app, is clutch. It finally gives fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging those seats you want. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. Puts the power back in your hands as a fan and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of seemingly impossible. You pull up the app, the layout makes it super simple to scroll through all the different matchups and compare your seat views along the way. You pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no no hunting for the fine print, and no losing out on those seats. And my favorite part about the app is the prices include fees right up front, which I absolutely love. No last-second surprises at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying your World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event beyond that with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. It's all courtesy of our friends over at Game Time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you patronage and your support of this podcast. If you've not done so already, please hit the like button if you're watching this on YouTube, and also hit that bell notification icon so you know when a new show debuts here on the network. And as always, thank you for all of your support. And this holiday season, when you're out with your family and friends who may be fellow Cougar fans, hey, tell them about this. It's daily BYU-centric content in all on-demand feature podcast form, and get it wherever they get their podcasts, YouTube and otherwise, Apple, Spotify, any myriad of the thousands of podcast apps it feels like that are out there. And as always, thank you for all of your support. All right, so before we go on today's show, BYU is obviously going to be needing to bolster some of their positions when it comes to the transfer portal. Just no doubt about that. You lose the likes of a guy like Jack Kelly from the linebacker room. I would imagine that Isaiah Glasgow at the bare minimum will explore jumping to the NFL despite having a year of eligibility remaining. And that's just where we're going to start here with this linebacker conversation, is that there's a number of position groups that BYU is going to need to bolster via the transfer portal. It's just a necessity in this day and age of college football, and especially being a Power 4 program like BYU is. BYU aspires, in my opinion, I think is a must-get for BYU in the transfer portal, and his name is Liona Lefau, and he plays for the Texas Longhorns. Now, if that name sounds familiar, BYU chased him. He's a four-star talent out of Kahuku High School out there on Oahu years and years ago. He just finished his junior season at Texas, and he has played a lot of football for the Texas Longhorns. His stats the last 2 years are 63 tackles in 2024 and 68 tackles this season, and just finished off the regular season for Texas with his best single game to date with 11 total tackles in their Texas A&M showdown against the Aggies. This is a kid who is not a guy who has been kind of scuffling along at Texas and looking for an opportunity, much like a former teammate of his like Tausili Akana. And it's nothing against Tausili because he's kind of blossomed at BYU when given the opportunity finally to do so. But at Texas, a guy like Tausili was kind of lost among all the different talented players that Texas brings in literally annually. Well, Liona Lefau is not that. He is a proven commodity. He is a starting caliber linebacker, and with the prospect of losing Jack Kelly in particular, and potentially also Isaiah Glasgow, I think Liona Lefau would be a perfect addition for BYU to bring in for his next season. Or I think it'd be probably his final season, if I recall correctly, because I think he's played 3 straight years. He's a true junior. He's just played 3 straight years of college, and his production obviously matches up with what BYU is looking for in terms of a guy you'd bring in, because you're not going to bring a guy into BYU's football program who has got 1 year of eligibility remaining, who's literally never played before. He has got 2 years of starting experience. He started 23 of the past 23 games for Texas. He's played in 40-plus games since he was a freshman at Texas. Those other games are mainly special teams duty and otherwise. But I'm telling you, this guy feels like a tailor-made replacement, whether it is for Isaiah Glasgow and or Jack Kelly. I think you bring him in, see where his best position is, and kind of unleash him in BYU's defense. I think what Jay Hill has proven as a defensive coordinator is he will obviously have his what he expects from guys in his scheme, but he will also mold it to accentuate and fit their strengths. And Liona Lefau, he may not be the biggest guy in the entire world. I think what they list him at. They list him at 6'1", 227 pounds. So he's more in the mold of a Jack Kelly, but I'm telling you, he has got the type of production that you look at and say, yeah, this is the type of guy that if you want to bring in a 1-year guy to potentially be a stopgap guy to come in, fill a role like Jack Kelly or Isaiah Glasgow has filled for multiple seasons for BYU, you could do a lot worse than bringing Liona into this program. And he's got ties to BYU. BYU chased him heavily when he was coming out of high school. A lot of people will tell you that he had interest in BYU, but at that point, remember, BYU's defense, when he was coming out, was still kind of in that Alaisa Tuiaki era where it did not look good. And I can understand why Texas and the allure of playing in the SEC, obviously they were in the Big 12 before they made the jump to the SEC. obviously pulled him to Austin, but now he's looking around at his options and maybe looking at maybe a more, I don't know what I'd call it, a more robust opportunity, a bigger potential in terms of going out there and having an impact. Well, why don't you circle back around and come to a place that you're wholly familiar with? Because being from Laie, Hawaii, he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as I understand it, and growing up in that community, he would know a whole lot about BYU and would understand exactly what the Cougars are all about. And now BYU finally has that, I guess you call it a track record or I don't know what you want to call it, but what Jay Hill has proven with this BYU defense is it's top 30 caliber in the country, top 20 caliber, and you're not going to be kind of lost in a scheme that is not going to have you showing your skills. You are going to absolutely be able to show what you're capable of, and in some ways, actually stand out even more than you might have stood out among some of your teammates that Texas would boast on their own defense. It's kind of crazy to think that BYU in 2 successive off seasons could add impact players from the University of Texas, but Tausili Akana has proven to be that this season for BYU. And next season, if all goes well, according to what I would hope here with Leona Lefau, I think it'd be a great pickup for BYU to bring him back to Provo and really unleash him in this defense. So I will continue to break down guys that I think BYU just absolutely needs to grab when it comes to transfer portal guys, because I've had coaches tell me, and other people, we've had this conversation on my radio show as well as other places, is that the funny thing about recruiting is you're building relationships both for now and in the future. And in this era of the transfer portal, guys are going to go to a school that they may not pick your school, speaking of BYU originally, but they'll go somewhere, and whether it works out or it doesn't, they may come back out in the open market when it comes to the transfer portal. And if you don't burn that bridge and you continue to keep those relationships strong with the player, in this case, in many cases, the agent, their family, that type of stuff, it can actually benefit you literally years down the line. Because we're talking, this is 3 years back. The BYU was recruiting Leona, and even a year before that, if not more, they probably had contact with him during his time playing for Kahuku High School. And all these years later, could it finally benefit BYU, the fact that they chased him long and hard during the recruiting process, probably watched him from afar at Texas, and having the ties like he has, probably to Tausili Akana, who I think is also from the North Shore. Yeah, this feels like in many cases a home run for BYU if they push to get him, that he may pick BYU, and obviously BYU be a major beneficiary of his talents, because the production he has shown at the SEC level, you're not going to argue with it. Because like I said, 68 and 63 tackles, that's nothing to sniff at. Now, is it the tackling machine that's obviously going to go to the NFL? No, probably not quite yet, but I may also be the reason why he's looking at other opportunities to go out there and show what he's capable of. And could BYU finally unlock him in terms of his overall capability? He's had 1 sack this year, 1 fumble recovery in 2025. Checking back on 2024, ended up that year with 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and then 1 interception. So he's had robust stats, but could this be the opportunity, if you were to pick BYU, to really come out and show what he's truly capable of in terms of unleashing his full potential? That's the question to be had. And it's kind of crazy how these relationships literally developed sometimes over 5, 6, 7 years can ultimately benefit BYU because they kept those relationships strong all these years during that period. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But I think Leona Lefau would be a major boon to BYU, especially in the circumstance that I would expect that we lose Isaiah Glasker and Jack Kelly to the NFL this offseason, because I don't see I know that Glasker has a year of eligibility remaining, but he's played a lot of college football, and I think it may be time for him to chase his professional fortunes. And like I said, you need to find some ready-made replacements for that, and Leona could be that guy that's out there on the open market. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the show. As always, thank you for your continued support of the show. Appreciate all of your patronage and obviously you guys being with us. A reminder for you guys, we have the brand new Everydayers Club, and right now, if Locked On Cougars made your Spotify Wrapped or your YouTube year-end wrap, prove it on social media and secure a free month of our new Everydayer Club. All you got to do is tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social media platform, and they will drop you a code for that free month. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club and get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. And the best part about it is you also get more than that. You get all access memberships in terms of getting new shows that are exclusive to our Everydayer Club. This is a fun new venture we're doing on Locked On Cougars. So as always, thank you for your continued support. So as always, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up next, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see our 24/7 National Locked On Podcast YouTube channel for all things college football, basketball, everything in between. And if you're listening in the audio format, make your second listen our friends over the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin's doing an incredible job covering things over there. But as always, thank you once again for all of your support here on the podcast, and come back and be an every day or tomorrow right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.